The air in Family Courtroom 3B was a stale cocktail of cheap floor polish, old paper, and quiet desperation. It clung to the dark wood of the benches and the high, water-stained ceilings, a scent designed to remind all who entered of their insignificance in the face of the institution. Fluorescent lights buzzed with an incessant nerve-jangling hum, casting a pale, sickly light that made everyone look guilty. Ilara Vance sat perfectly still on a hard wooden bench, a small island of calm in a sea of institutional anxiety. She wore a simple gray blouse, faded at the elbows, and a pair of black slacks that had seen better years. Her appearance was a carefully constructed whisper of struggle, of a woman just barely keeping her head above water. But her posture told a different story. Her back was ramrod straight, her hands rested calmly in her lap, and her eyes, dark and intelligent, missed nothing. She catalogued the weary slump of the bailiff, the nervous tick of the court stenographer, and the precise angle of the American flag drooping from its golden pole. This was a battlefield, and she was absorbing its topography. The heavy courtroom doors swung open with a dramatic groan, and Prosecutor Alden Croft strode in. He was a man stitched together from arrogance and expensive tailoring. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, his jaw was set in a permanent sneer, and his Tom Ford suit probably cost more than Ilara's car. Croft moved as if he owned the very air in the room, his polished Oxfords clicking a rhythm of self-importance on the worn linoleum floor. His gaze swept the room and landed on Ilara. He saw exactly what she wanted him to see, a poor, tired black woman, out of her depth and easily broken. A faint, cruel smile touched his lips before he turned his attention to his pristine leather briefcase, dismissing her from his reality. Inside his head, a familiar script began to play. He thought it with the casual disdain of a man swatting a fly, comes in here from God knows where, thinks she can play house. He felt a surge of righteous power, the familiar warmth that came from restoring order, from putting people back in their designated boxes. He was the gatekeeper, he was the law. All rise. The bailiff droned, his voice devoid of emotion. Judge Marian Albright entered, her black robes swishing with a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. She was a woman in her late 50s, with a face that had been hardened by decades of witnessing human fallibility. She settled into a high-backed leather chair, the throne from which she dispensed fractured futures. "We are here to rule on the petition of the state regarding the guardianship of the minor, Leo Vance," she announced, her voice flat. Alden Croft rose smoothly to his feet. "Your Honor," he began, his voice a rich baritone that filled the courtroom. "The state is here today to protect a child whose future is in grave peril if he is allowed to remain in the care of his aunt, Miss Ilara Vance." He paused, letting the words hang in the stale air. He gestured dismissively toward Ilara, without even gracing her with a look. "This woman," he continued, his tone dripping with condescension, "lives in a neighborhood known more for sirens than for lullabies. She holds a low-wage job with inconsistent hours. She has no husband, no support system to speak of." Ilara's expression did not change. Her heart rate remained a steady, placid 60 beats per minute. She was listening, not as a victim, but as an analyst collecting data points. Each sneering word, each prejudiced assumption was another nail. Croft was hammering into his own coffin. "But more troubling than her financial instability, Your Honor, is her character." Croft paced before the judge's bench like a predator sizing up its cornered prey. Vance's past, a sealed juvenile record. Ilara's lawyer, a nervous young man named Mr. Harris, shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. That record is sealed by law. It is inadmissible, and its very mention is a gross violation of— "Sit down, boy," Croft barked, not even turning to face him. He directed all his performance to the judge. "Your Honor, when the welfare of a child is at stake, we must consider the full picture. And the picture here is of a woman with a criminal history. A drug possession charge." The word drug was delivered with a theatrical hiss. "We cannot, in good conscience, place an impressionable young boy in the care of an individual with such a background. She is, to put it plainly, an unfit guardian." The final words cracked through the room like a whip. Unfit. The label was designed to strip Ilara of her dignity, her humanity, her love for the nephew she had raised since her sister's passing. Judge Albright looked from Croft's smug, confident face to Ilara's unnervingly calm one. She saw a tired woman in a worn blouse. She sighed, a small puff of weary air. "Mr. Croft, you are aware of the statutes regarding sealed juvenile records." "I am, Your Honor," Croft said smoothly, "and I am also aware of my duty to protect the children of this city. Sometimes that duty requires us to look past procedural niceties and see the stark, ugly truth." He was so confident, so utterly certain of his power, of his rightness. He believed the rules were for other people. He was wrong. Croft continued his assault, his voice rising with theatrical indignation. He painted a lurid picture of Leo's life with Ilara, a fantasy woven from classist tropes and racist dog whistles. He spoke of blighted streets and negative influences, of a cycle of poverty and crime that Leo would inevitably be dragged into. Each word was a carefully chosen poison dart aimed at assassinating Ilara's character in the eyes of the court. Ilara listened. She felt the knot of cold, hard rage in her stomach, an old friend she had learned to control and channel. She did not let it touch her face. Her composure was a shield, but it was also a weapon. She knew men like Croft, they fed on fear and intimidation. When they were met with serene stillness, it infuriated them. It drove them to make mistakes. Croft, sensing he had the judge's reluctant attention, escalated further. He began to mock Ilara's lawyer, Mr. Harris, belittling his arguments and questioning his competence. "Is this the best representation you could afford, Ms. Vance?" Croft sneered, finally looking directly at her. "This public defender? He can barely string a coherent sentence together." Mr. Harris flushed a deep, painful red. He was young, yes, and outmatched by Croft's venom. But he was doing his job. He was following the plan. Ilara gave a nearly imperceptible nod, a signal only Harris would understand. "Stay the course," she continued her silent observation, her mind a whirring engine of logic and calculation. She noted the way Judge Albright's fingers tapped an impatient rhythm on her desk whenever Croft's rhetoric strayed too far into overt prejudice. She noted the bailiff shifting his weight, a subtle sign of discomfort. She noted the reporter from the city paper in the back row, scribbling furiously in her notepad. Every detail was a piece of the trap. The court took a 15-minute recess. Mr. Harris leaned close to Ilara, his hands trembling slightly. "Ilara, are you sure you want to do this?" he whispered, his voice tight with anxiety. "We can ask for a continuance. The judge looks like she's buying it. He's a monster." Ilara looked at her young, earnest lawyer. She had chosen him specifically for his unassuming nature, for the very fact that Croft would dismiss him out of hand. "Patience, Mr. Harris," she said, her voice low and steady, a balm on his frayed nerves. "He's building our case for us. Let him have his moment. Let him put every ounce of his arrogance on the official record." Harris stared at her, still uncertain. "But he's breaking the law. He's committing professional suicide and doesn't even know it." "Exactly," Ilara confirmed. Men like Croft believe they are the law. They don't think the rules apply to them. Today, we are going to teach him otherwise. Her calm resolve was more intimidating than any outburst could have been. Harris swallowed hard and nodded. He trusted her. He had seen the files. He knew who she really was. When court resumed, Croft's smugness had metastasized into full-blown triumphalism. He believed he had already won. Judge Albright turned her gaze to Ilara. "Miss Vance, do you have anything you wish to say in response to the prosecutor's claims?" This was the moment. Ilara stood slowly, her movements deliberate and graceful. She did not look like a defeated woman. She looked like a queen about to address her court. "Yes, Your Honor, I do." Her voice was not loud, but it was clear and carried a surprising weight of authority. It cut through the room's oppressive atmosphere like a surgeon's scalpel. The sudden shift in her demeanor was palpable. Even Croft paused, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "Your Honor," Ilara began, "Mr. Croft speaks of my neighborhood. He has never been there. He has never met me. He speaks of my love for my nephew, and he knows nothing of love." The words were simple, direct, and devastatingly effective. "I have raised Leo since he was 2 years old, since my sister, his mother, passed from this earth. I have worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over his head, to ensure he is fed, and to buy his school books. I have helped him with his homework every night. I have taught him to be kind, to be honest. That is my character." Croft's face began to darken with rage. This was not in his script. The little downtrodden woman was not supposed to speak with such eloquence, such dignity. Her calm defiance was an intolerable sign of disrespect. It was a personal insult to his power, his status, his entire world-view. He saw the judge's expression soften slightly, a hint of sympathy creeping into her hardened features. He couldn't allow it. "Now, Your Honor," Croft boomed, jumping to his feet. "This is a touching performance, but it changes nothing. She can talk all she wants about homework and bedtime stories, but she cannot erase her past." He strode to his table and snatched up a document. This was his overreach. This was the bait. "I am now submitting into evidence, as states Exhibit A, a certified copy of M.S. Vance's juvenile criminal record." He slammed it down on the clerk's desk. Slam. The sound echoed in the silent courtroom. It was a definitive, irrevocable act of professional self-immolation. He had just entered, illegally obtained, statutorily sealed information into a public proceeding. He believed it was his checkmate, his final, unanswerable blow. He turned to Ilara, a sneer of pure victory twisting his features. "You're out of your league, girl," he hissed, his voice low enough that only she and the stenographer could hear. He looked up at the judge, his confidence absolute. "I am the law in this room, Your Honor, and the law says this woman is a criminal. She is unfit, case closed." He sat down, crossing his arms, the very picture of arrogant triumph. He waited for the judge to rule, for the gavel to fall, for the sweet taste of another victory. He waited, but the gavel did not fall. Instead, a profound silence descended upon the courtroom. It was a heavy, expectant silence, the kind that precedes either a storm or an execution. Ilara Vance gave Mr. Harris another tiny, almost invisible nod. The trap was set. The prey was inside. Mr. Harris stood, his earlier nervousness replaced by a newfound steely resolve borrowed from his client. "Your Honor," he said, his voice ringing with clarity, "before the court accepts State's Exhibit A, the defense has a document of its own that we believe bears directly on this matter." Croft scoffed audibly. "What's it going to be? A character reference from her pastor? A note from the boy's teacher?" He sneered to his junior associate. Ilara rose from her seat, a silent signal to Harris. She would handle this herself. "If I may, Your Honor?" she asked, her voice still unnervingly calm. Judge Albright, intrigued by this sudden turn, nodded. "Proceed, MS." Vance, Ilara walked not to her lawyer's table, but directly toward the court clerk. She moved with a quiet purpose that drew every eye in the room. From the simple worn tote bag at her side, the same bag Croft had likely dismissed as a symbol of her poverty, she withdrew a large manila envelope. It was not crumpled or worn. It was crisp, clean, and sealed with a heavy, crimson wax seal bearing the official crest of the state governor's office. The power dynamic in the room shifted instantly. It was a physical change, as if the polarity of the earth had suddenly reversed. The predator, Alden Croft, suddenly looked very much like prey. A flicker of genuine unease, the first he had shown all day, crossed his face. His arrogant smirk faltered. What was this? This was not part of the game. Ilara placed the envelope gently on the clerk's desk. "Your Honor," she announced, her voice resonating with a power that no one in the room had anticipated. "This is a full, unconditional, and executory gubernatorial pardon for the charge Mr. Croft has so graciously and illegally entered into the record." A collective gasp swept through the gallery. The reporter's pen flew across her pad. Croft's face drained of all color, leaving a pasty, sickly white mask of disbelief. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "The pardon was granted by Governor Thompson himself 7 years ago," Ilara continued, her gaze locked on the stunned prosecutor. "It not only erases the conviction but legally expunges the very existence of the charge. To possess a record of it, let alone to introduce it in a court of law, is a Class C felony under State Penal Code 7.44. She was not just a mother fighting for her nephew. She was quoting. The blood drained from Alden Croft's face. He began to sweat, a single bead tracing a path down his temple. The Tom Ford suit suddenly seemed too tight, a woolen silk coffin constricting his chest. His mind, usually so quick and cruel, was a vortex of white noise and panic. A pardon? A governor's pardon. How? Why? But Ilara was not finished. She reached into her tote bag again. This time, she produced a second document, a thick sheaf of papers, bound in a simple blue cover. "And this, Your Honor," she said, her voice dropping, becoming quieter, sharper, more lethal, "is a copy of a formal complaint filed with the State Bar Disciplinary Committee at 9 o'clock this morning." She placed it on top of the first envelope. "It details a pattern of prosecutorial misconduct by Mr. Croft, including evidence tampering, witness intimidation, illegal use of sealed records to coerce and blackmail defendants in this district for the past 5 years. If the pardon was a body blow, this was a dagger to the heart." Croft's composure completely shattered. He shot to his feet, his chair screeching backward. "This is outrageous, a fabrication," he sputtered, his voice a panicked squawk. This woman is a desperate criminal, manufacturing lies. I demand this be stricken. She is in contempt." Judge Albright ignored him. She was staring at Ilara, her eyes wide with a dawning, shocking realization. She was not looking at an unfit mother. She was looking at someone else entirely. "Vance," the judge said slowly, the honorific now imbued with a newfound respect, "who are you?" This was the moment of the reveal. The culmination of a year of painstaking work, of living a lie, of enduring insults and condescension, all for this single perfect instant of karmic annihilation. Ilara turned her body slightly, addressing not just the judge, but the entire courtroom. "My name is Ilara Vance, Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and ringing with absolute authority. "And for the last 10 years, I have served as the senior field investigator for the Governor's Innocence and Integrity Project." Silence. A thick, profound silence that was more shocking than any shout. Croft froze his hand, halfway to his briefcase, his face a grotesque mask of horror and dawning comprehension. "My primary function," Ilara continued, her gaze boring into Croft, pinning him to his spot. "My job is to find, document, and expose corrupt officials. Prosecutors, just like Mr. Croft." Each word was a perfectly placed shot from a high-powered rifle. "The expunged charge from my youth was my entry point. It was a minor, foolish mistake I made as a teenager. When Governor Thompson learned of it during my vetting process, he saw an opportunity. He granted me a full pardon and gave me his blessing to use my own history as bait to test the integrity of prosecutors across the state." She let that sink in. She had not been a victim in this courtroom. She had been... And Alden Croft had walked right into her snare. "My nephew, Leo, coming into my care last year, provided the perfect cover for an investigation into this district, where we had received dozens of anonymous complaints about Mr. Croft's tactics. Everything he has said today, every illegal procedure he has followed, every prejudiced assumption he has made, has been meticulously documented." The reporter in the back was no longer writing. She was staring, her mouth agape, her phone in her hand, likely sending a frantic text to her editor. "Get down here, now." Croft's world was collapsing in on him in real time, the walls of the courtroom squeezing the air from his lungs. The faces of his colleagues, his junior associates, were turned toward him, a mixture of shock, betrayal, and dawning disgust. The edifice of his career, built on bullying and breaking the rules, was crumbling to dust before his very eyes. Judge Albright picked up the documents Ilara had provided. Her hands, usually so steady, had a slight tremble. She read the cover letter from the governor's office, her eyes scanning the official letterhead, the embossed seal, the governor's unmistakable signature. She then looked at the complaint filed with the bar. It was a masterpiece of legal devastation, complete with dates, case numbers, and sworn affidavits from previous victims of Croft's misconduct. Her face hardened into a mask of cold, judicial fury. She lifted her gaze from the papers and fixed it upon the unraveling prosecutor. "Mr. Croft," she said, her voice low and trembling with controlled rage, "you have not only perjured yourself in my courtroom, you have committed multiple felonies. You have abused your office, you have trampled on the civil rights of a citizen, and you have brought profound and lasting shame upon this court and upon the entire legal profession." Her condemnation was absolute, a final judgment delivered from on high. As if on cue, two individuals who had been sitting quietly in the back of the gallery stood up. They were not reporters. They were two men in dark, conservative suits, with the unmistakable bearing of federal law enforcement. They walked forward, their steps measured and purposeful, parting the stunned crowd like a ship through water. One of them held up a badge. "State Attorney General's office," he said, his voice calm and professional. They walked directly to the prosecution's table, ignoring everyone else. They stopped beside the paralyzed Alden Croft. "Alden Croft," the agent said, his voice devoid of any emotion, "you are under arrest for felony, abuse of power, evidence tampering, and multiple violations of state and federal law." The second agent pulled out a pair of steel handcuffs. The sharp, metallic click as he unlocked them echoed through the cavernous silence of the room. Click, click. Croft stared at the handcuffs as if they were venomous snakes. This wasn't happening. A bad dream from which he would surely awaken. But the cold steel that encircled his first wrist was undeniably real, and the second click, as the cuff was secured, was the sound of his life ending. He was stripped of his dignity, his power, and his freedom in the very room that had been the temple of his arrogance. As the agents pulled him to his feet, his expensive suit, now looking like a clown's costume, his eyes found Ilara's. They were filled with a toxic brew of hatred, disbelief, and a pathetic, pleading confusion. He had been so sure. He had looked at her and seen a nobody, a piece of social detritus to be swept aside. He had never once considered that she could be his executioner. Ilara met his gaze. She took a single step closer, her face impassive. Her voice, when she spoke, dropped to a quiet, lethal whisper that was meant only for him. A final, perfectly twisted shard of irony. "You called me unfit," she said softly. "You were right. I am unfit for corruption." The agents led him away, a broken, shuffling man, his head bowed in utter and public humiliation. The last thing he heard as the courtroom doors swung shut behind him was the sharp, definitive crack of Judge Albright's gavel bang. The fallout was not merely a storm, it was a cataclysm. Alden Croft's ruin was swift, total, and exquisitely detailed. The story was the lead item on every news broadcast that evening, the front page headline of every paper the next morning. Courtroom STINGRREA ASTEDINDRMATICTAKEDOWN. The media frenzy was relentless. Reporters dug into every case Croft had ever tried, unearthing a veritable graveyard of potential miscarriages of justice. The Attorney General's office, armed with Ilara's meticulously compiled evidence, indicted him on 16 separate felony counts. His law license was summarily suspended, pending a disbarment that was a foregone conclusion. His assets were frozen as part of the criminal investigation, leaving him unable to afford the kind of high-priced legal shark he himself had once been. In a stroke of beautiful, dark irony, his wife of 20 years filed for divorce within a week, her petition citing the public humiliation and the discovery of his vast hidden corruption. She took the house, the cars, and what was left of their savings. His friends, the powerful judges and politicians he had played golf with, suddenly couldn't recall his name. His calls went unanswered. He was a pariah, a leper in the elite society that had once celebrated him. His trial was a public spectacle. He sat day after day, a shrunken figure in a cheap, off-the-rack suit, listening as a parade of witnesses. People he had bullied, framed, and railroaded testified against him. The jury, presented with Ilara's irrefutable evidence, took less than an hour to convict him on all counts. The judge, a man who had once been his colleague, sentenced him to the maximum term, 20 years in state prison. Not a country club minimum security facility, but hard time. Alden Croft, the man who believed he was the law, would spend the next 2 decades living by the very rules he had so gleefully broken. But the consequences rippled far beyond his personal destruction. Ilara's investigation became the catalyst for systemic reform. A special commission was formed to review every single case Croft had prosecuted over the last decade. Dozens of convictions were overturned. Men and women who had lost years of their lives based on his manufactured evidence and coerced testimony walked free. New legislation, informally dubbed the Vance Act, was passed, creating stricter penalties for prosecutorial misconduct and establishing new protocols for the handling of sealed and expunged records. The corrupt system had not been entirely destroyed, but it had been dealt a staggering blow. It had been cleansed, just a little, by the fire of one woman's righteous resolve. 6 months later, the sterile scent of floor polish was gone, replaced by the smell of fresh paint and new beginnings. Ilara Vance stood in a spacious corner office, its large windows offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. This was the new expanded headquarters for the Innocence and Integrity Project, which she now directed. The governor had tripled their funding and given her a mandate to hunt down every Alden Croft in the state. In the corner of the office, at a small table just for him, sat Leo. He was happily drawing a colorful masterpiece of superheroes and dinosaurs taking shape on the page. He was safe. He was happy. He was hers, her custody now undisputed and permanent, rubber-stamped by a humbled and deeply respectful family court. Her phone rang. It was Mr. Harris. "Just calling to congratulate you again, Director Vance," he said, his voice warm with admiration. He was her new deputy director, his career now on a trajectory he could never have imagined. Ilara smiled, watching Leo scribble with intense concentration. "Thank you, Harris. But the work is just getting started." She looked out the window at the sprawling city below, a complex tapestry of lives and laws, of justice and injustice. "You know," she said, her voice soft and philosophical, "Croft's mistake wasn't just breaking the law. It was a failure of imagination." "How so?" Harris asked. "The robe doesn't make you a king, Harris. It's supposed to make you a servant." He forgot that. He thought power was a sword when it's meant to be a shield. It was the moral of the story, the core truth she fought for every day. "I'll see you at the staff meeting tomorrow," she said, concluding the call. She hung up the phone and walked over to Leo's table. She knelt down, her eyes level with his. "What are you drawing, sweetie?" she asked. He pointed a crayon-stained finger at a figure in the center of the page, a woman with a determined expression and a flowing cape. "It's you," he said simply. "You're the superhero." Ilara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling more satisfying than any legal victory. She kissed the top of his head, then returned to her desk. On it sat a new case file, thick with legal documents and the desperate plea of a family convinced their loved one was innocent. She opened it, her expression calm, focused, and ready. The fight continued. What an incredible story of karmic justice. Ilara Vance proved that true strength doesn't come from a fancy suit or a powerful title, but from courage, intelligence, and an unbreakable will to do what is right. Alden Croft thought he was untouchable, a king in his own courtroom, but karma came for him in the form of a quiet, underestimated woman who was always 10 steps ahead. He learned the hard way that the law is a shield for the innocent, not a weapon for the corrupt. If you loved watching this arrogant bully get exactly what he deserved, please smash that like button right now. Your support really helps the channel bring more stories like this to you every single day. And why not share this video with anyone who loves a satisfying story of karma and justice served cold? Everyone appreciates seeing a villain get their public comeuppance. Most importantly, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on our daily drama and revenge stories. We have a new one for you every day. Let me know in the comments below, what would you have done if you were in Ilara's shoes? Would you have had the patience to see the plan through to the end? See you in the next video.